On this Mortgage Note podcast, we speak with Megan Castleton, Chief Credit Officer for Constructive Capital. She brings a background in competitive boxing to the world of finance.
The outreach from our company is, we look to reach across not only business purpose, private lender platforms, but we're looking to reach, IMBs, independent mortgage bankers, individual brokers and loan officers, and introduce them to new revenue streams like DSCR programs for business purpose, and as well as our RTL product line, which includes fix and flip, bridge, no rehab transactions, and ground up construction.
Now, I understand that you come to the world of finance, but also you're an athlete, you're a boxer, and you sort of bring the principles of your sport into the world of finance.
I do. I found it really, really helpful, right? So, previous athletic background in water polo prior to women's teams really being acceptable, where I grew up in San Diego. So played on the men's water polo team first. And then eventually, by my senior year, they had developed a women's water polo team, recruited for college for water polo. Went into finance very early, 17 years old, came into, early stages of the 125 LTV market, if anybody remembers that back in the mid 90s. And that's really where I started my career in finance. I began my boxing career probably around 18, 19 years old. Really started out as exercise, a way to, relax and have some fun with friends, and really turned into something I just loved and fell in love with and had a passion for. And then, began actually competing in boxing matches. Boxing at that time was really tied to, or at least the gym that I went to was really closely tied to MMA and MMA fighters. The gym was LA Boxing, and it was, in downtown Huntington there. And so it started out as, a hobby really turned into a long-term passion. And I think a lot of the principles that I learned in boxing really do apply to business, right? It's mentally over physical, how much and, can you get done? How much can you withstand? Multitasking, right? So, you're balancing a career and a life and, this sport and all the demands of this sport. And I think that translates really, really well into the corporate environment. It instilled a toughness. Women were not in that sport. You get told no a lot, that you can't do this, you can't do that. You're never going to be this, you're never going to be that. And so, for me and my personality, that's like waving, the red flag in front of the bull. And it's like, okay, well, that's the challenge. And that's what I want to take up. And I want to prove that we can.
Yeah, so in doing that, of course, there are many challenges in finance, and really, being the upper part of any sort of company, you have a lot of responsibility. Can you explain a little more how these boxing philosophies really help you day to day?
Building teams and building the right team, right? So when you're an athlete, you have your coach, you have your teammates, you rely on certain people to help professionally and mentally, get through those challenges, and rely on them to, provide you with their knowledge and strength. And that translates to the corporate world, right? How do you build your team in the corporate world? How do you select the right players for your team that add to the strengths of the team in general, right? So learning where your weaknesses are as a leader, as an athlete, teach you what you also need to do from a team perspective and how to add that team. You become very self-aware as an athlete of what your weaknesses and your strengths are. And you can go out and find those things in your teammates and your team members and your coaches, the same way that you do in building teams in, credit risk and additional, corporate team building. So I would say that's definitely one of the places that I use it to this day still. I would say too, the mental aspect of it, right? Not every day in lending is fun. There's been some wild swings in this market, coming from the banking and residential side, living through the large blow up of the subprime, and then coming back into the business purpose space, it's adapting and changing, and sports teach you that. It teaches you that mental toughness to hang in there and to continue to adapt and change to your environment. If you do not adapt and change to your environment in lending, you go the way of the dinosaur, and there's just nothing here for you, right? It's a constant evolution. The same way that it is in an athlete's body and mind, it's a constant evolution of who you are, your skill set, and how you translate those things into the environment around you. Even in an individual fight, sometimes you find yourself in those fights in corporate America, right? And so it's really learning how to pick those battles, how to use strategy, and not brute force all the time.
Speaking of a lot of change and having to, fight some uphill obstacles, just in a handful of years, we've had a pandemic, we've had a rise in the rates, as you mentioned a moment ago. Supply and demand sort of been thrown out of whack during the pandemic and since. You've had an awful lot of change in the lending business and in all aspects of the real estate business in quite a short amount of time. How has that gone for your company, and what are you sort of looking at moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think constructive is a rare breed in wholesale lending. And that's really a testament to Ben Fertig and his leadership here at the company. It's really what attracted me to the company. Ben comes from the same background that I do. He's been around for a very long time. He's ridden through these markets, right? And being in different businesses, doing consulting work, you get to meet a lot of different type of leadership and see what, their experience brings to the business. And Ben, bar none, just has an amazing background that I believe, riding through those challenges in some of those markets, help Constructive be well positioned, right? He understands what the market's doing without being overreactive to it. Constructive really understands who brokers are and what brokers need and what the challenges are that face brokers, and the need for additional revenue streams, even, in the residential space. So I came from the residential consumer space. And when I first came into this side of the business, it was very much frowned upon, right? Like, you don't belong here. This is commercial, and we're so different. But there's so many similarities, and Constructive gets that. They're extremely well positioned on capital. I mean, we just completed a public merger with NYMT. So I think there's just longevity and future and experience here that I don't feel has existed in my past. And it's been a really good meshing of all those past experiences into the right leadership team and the right business. I'm really focused on, the business is really focused on at this point, continuing to grow our RTL line of business. So fix and flip, bridge no rehab products, ground up construction products, line of credit products that, give this ability to brokers to find the client and have a life cycle with this client, right? So you can help them with their primary residence, you can help them with their secondary residence, you can now come over to Constructive, you can get them their business purpose loans, you can get them their construction loans and fix and flip loans for their investment properties. Most brokers know that, your borrower is not typically a singular transaction, right? They have other interests in real estate, and we're really here to support, that additional interest and come up with things that are exciting and new and solve problems for brokers that are a challenge in this space, right? Help them understand it. The language is different. The submission process may be different. So, we do a lot of outreach and we do a lot of education in this space too, as well as broker advocacy.
Speaking of the fix and flip sort of market, I understand that there is an increase right now in people that are investing in properties, not necessarily to live in, but either, to buy and invest and fix up, but not only just to flip, but also perhaps move into a rental agreement sort of business. How would you address this trend? Where are we at with that now?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the shows out there for, everybody to consume around, how to buy a property and fix up a property. What do you do with it after that, right? Okay, I want to rent it. I want to create wealth through real estate. And that's really what the DSCR product is about. It's an investment purpose loan. It's for, rental properties, long-term hold. So you get the benefit of that, long-term duration, lower rate, and really help building wealth and real estate portfolios through this. You can do this without as much cash downlay, and honestly, a lower bar for entry. It doesn't necessarily require that you have ever owned or managed an investment property before, provided that you meet the correct qualifications. It's a way for the everyday person to be able to start to transact and understand real estate and build a portfolio and something that they can pass to their children.
And are there metro areas that you're seeing more of a climb in that? As far as regionally speaking, like I understand there's a tremendous amount of growth in places like Austin, San Antonio, Atlanta, not Florida as much as it used to be, but still somewhat active there. Are you seeing more activity based on geography sometimes? And what tends to be your fastest growing sort of area that you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, obviously everything in real estate is cyclical. These markets are cyclical, these geographies are cyclical. So, the focus on certain areas, as you mentioned, Florida may be waning, but the Midwest and, the eastern part of the country is definitely heating up. The most important thing for DSCR is that the lease coverage is there to cover the P&I and the taxes and insurance payments. So you're really looking for deals that middle America can pay rent on, appropriate valuation so that you can get these deals to pencil out, right? And so in metros that are doing that, you mentioned a few, Carolinas, being one that we've seen an uptick, Alabama that we're seeing an uptick, right? And so you start to watch the trends for the millennial generation, which has really gone more towards renting versus owning. And that's really, your renter market. So as they move around to different segments and sections where housing is more affordable, where rents are more affordable, you definitely see, that geography move around the country. And to your point, I think it's all cyclical. I think we really like the Midwest and the Carolinas right now. We're definitely seeing an increase in deals that make a lot of sense.
Where do you see yourself in constructive capital being in, say, 1 year or even 5 years, as far as the trends that you're seeing and, of course, your personal goals with the company?
Personally, this is where I hope to retire, right? And I think I found the dream job, so I feel very, very blessed, very, very lucky. I would say from a company perspective, we are looking to become the largest RTL and DSCR provider. There's many markets that we are the largest provider of capital for the DSCR, rental market. We hope to continue to drive technology and automation to make this even easier and faster, and to really have a customer service experience that aligns with the broker and the borrower expectation there. So we've definitely put a lot of money and time into building out our technologies. So I think over the next year or two, what Constructive is right now as a process is going to look entirely different. And that's so exciting to me because it's a passion, right? Constructive has a passion for bigger, faster, stronger. How do we make this a better client experience? And so I'm glad that the 20 plus years of technology and the consumer side is really starting to mesh into the private lending space, right? We're really far behind. There is no standardized technology, and it's starting to happen, right? And it's really exciting to be on the forefront of that and be able to execute on Constructive's vision over the next 5 years of these kind of advances, not only in product, but in technology and process, to completely reimagine how you submit a loan, how you transact with a lender, besides just having to manually type things in or dropping files. There's so many advancements with AI and some of these other technologies that can just completely reimagine a broker and customer experience and speed of execution.
Now, after being in this business for so long, and I see that you're like 3 decades in now into this type of business, how does it still remain personal to you? What gets you excited about doing your work every day and going into the office and saying, wow, I like this?
Every day it changes, right? So to your point, there's never been a calm market, I guess. You're always waiting for the shoe to drop. What's the next thing? What's the next product? How do I improve this? For me, it's a personal mission that aligns really well with capital. It's always improving. It's always changing, and I think that's what gets me out of bed every day. Um, Constructive has added a new level of excitement. The team here is just bar none one of the best I've ever worked for and worked with. So, just these projects, and to be on the forefront and the cutting edge of something new, something different, something reimagined. Lending's lending, right? It always has been, always will be. But to be able to continue to drive a trend or to really reimagine this experience right now is really what I'm passionate about. And it's been a culmination of all of my experience over those 3 decades, and the experience of the industry and all these turbulent times that, I think at this point in my career, just kind of hitting that stride. I think also the relationships, right? There is an incredible amount of relationship that goes on in lending, both between the broker and the wholesale lender, the salespersons, the staff, your processor, your underwriter, your funder. And I think as some companies have gone more towards that technology, that personal experience has been lost. How do you extend that experience into an environment that is more technical and technologically advanced? I think Constructive as a whole does an amazing job of providing that relationship, growing their clients, growing their brokers, educating their brokers. And so, I think that's something that we don't talk about enough in this space. And, it's not something that Constructive brags about, but some of the strongest relationships I've ever seen.
We have been speaking with Megan Castleton, Chief Credit Officer for Constructive Capital. To learn more about Castleton and Constructive, visit constructiveloans.com.